All right, folks, how are you? Good? Long day? Are you awake? There's plenty. I cannot count how much coffee I've had, but last stretch. And we are running like a few minutes late. I know at 5:10 we have a big .NET session. I don't know how many of you want to go hear that, so I'll try to wrap up as quickly as I can here, maybe like 5:05. So let's talk a little bit of JavaScript and mixing and matching different things together. How many of you have heard about this thing called .NET MAUI? Some of you? Okay, so we have had a few sessions on the .NET side of the family today. There are exciting tech like .NET MAUI, like Blazor, a lot of .NET things. But we live in a world where things can be nicely, mix and matched. So let's see what the possibilities are. Okay, is this working? Yes. All right, so I'm Sam. I work as a dev advocate here at Progress Software, and we help support developers to be more successful building UI components and styles, across JavaScript and .NET, trying to get you to be a little bit more productive. Okay, so that's me, and you can, find me online at most of the places. That's my social handle. Okay, I did bring slides, but they're not important. Let's just fly through this, and feel free to stop me, ask me questions. I will try to show you as much of code as I can in 20 minutes, which is a really short amount of time, but I'll try. Hopefully you see the promise. Modern .NET is a nice place to be. I know the JavaScript universe and the ecosystem are pretty nice too, but tools are nice. Either side of the table, ecosystems are nice. You can reach a lot of different platforms. So modern .NET is actually a really nice and friendly place to come in. Let's talk about mobile a little bit, and we'll talk about desktop a little bit as well, because you don't build native mobile apps or native desktop apps if you're coming from the web world, but we are trying to be welcoming. We are trying to say, come and join our pain of native development, and you will see what it is like, desktop deployment, going to the stores with your mobile apps. It's complicated. So you have a lot of choice. Pick something that works for you based on whatever else that you're building. Hopefully you can share the most code. You can do web stuff very comfortably. Mobile web, PWA, you can actually make very good citizens on mobile or desktop, with JavaScript or any other web technologies. If you want to go native, you can. It's just expensive. iOS, Android, Windows, they're very different platforms. So you'll have to have 3 different teams with 3 different code bases. So hopefully you're trying to go cross-platform. With cross-platform, you've had a lot of choice. You could do native apps with JavaScript that are cross-platform. And on the .NET side, if you are compiling things down, you have quite a few options. I'm going to talk about the most hip and cool option nowadays with MAUI and maybe a little bit of Flutter. So everything should be coming over nicely to native land if we can. If you have not known, since you folks maybe do not, how many of you do .NET? Okay, so, most of the room, so you do know a little bit. I know just enough JavaScript to be dangerous, but if you have not heard, this is what we're talking about. This is how we started with .NET cross-platform. We started with, writing a little bit of C# that is shared between platforms, and we wrote iOS, Android separately. Then we started doing Xamarin Forms, which was an abstraction. So I don't need to learn much about Android or iOS. I can just write C# or I can just write XAML. And then that gets rendered out as native UI across different platforms. So this was a good story, but it ran its course for like 7-8 years, and now it's time to evolve to the next thing, which is already here. It's called .NET MAUI. We have said this a few times. MAUI stands for Multi-Platform App UI. The P is silent because MPAUI does not sound very good. So it's MAUI. It's the island in Hawaii. So what is cool about this is truly a shared code base. We want to be lazy. We want to be reusing as many things as we can. So MAUI now lets you reach mobile and desktop. So iOS, Android are kind of given. Now we are adding on Windows and Mac and Tizen and your devices and AR, VR maybe eventually. So this is the .NET cross-platform strategy going forward. What is nice is it tries to reuse as much code as possible. So your splash screens, your fonts, your CSS, all of it can be shared between platforms. Architecture, it's nicely thought out, and it's a nice new ecosystem to come into. So it's still early days, but it's got a lot of promise to it. Desktop, for the older people like me who have to support desktop apps, it's important. You're driving your enterprise workflows a lot, so you need some flexibility. You need to know, how to build desktop apps right. And again, based on how old you are, this will be very scary or very liberating, because you have a lot of choice. Windows has evolved over last 25 years, so you can go all in with native Windows, or you can try cross-platform strategies like the few at the bottom here. So you have a lot of choice on how to build Windows desktop apps. Similar story on Mac and Linux as well. Again, a lot of native stuff if you want, or a lot of cross-platform stuff. So just a lot of options here. And if anybody wants, I can make the slides available later on. Let's just look at more of the promise if we can. So web is where most likely many of you are. If you're building with .NET or JavaScript, you have, again, a lot of choice as to how you build a modern web app. If you are an ASP.NET or a .NET developer, you have likely been on ASP.NET, which is, again, 15, 20 years of evolution. Modern ASP.NET is very open source. It's very modular, very friendly. It's performant, but it's mostly, server-side. And then came, other, modern ways of building, web apps, which is, all of your JavaScript SPA frameworks, all of that, and CSS, less. Nobody uses less anymore, but Sass. But you can build modern apps however you want. Blazor is a .NET thing that came along maybe 3-4 years back, and it's really nice because now you can do Blazor that is both server-side and client-side, or a mix of the two. So it can be, put on as it's a web app that you're writing, but C# front and back, client-side as well as server-side. And you can wrap up Blazor and put it on mobile apps, put it on desktop apps as well. So you get to share a lot of code. So it's essentially called Blazor Hybrid. But again, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not just Blazor that we are welcoming to desktop or mobile. You can also bring in JavaScript, which is why I made the crossover, because you can do JavaScript on desktop and mobile very comfortably now. Okay, hopefully you are trying to move things forward. So if you have any investments in JavaScript, Angular, React, Vue, jQuery, all of that is powering your web apps, and that's fine. But if your clients keep on asking about native apps, now you have some opportunities to bring them nicely. Again, this is nothing new. Things like Electron have existed for desktop, but it doesn't work on mobile. PWAs are an option, but again, there are some limitations to how native your apps get to be. If you want to pull up a camera or a geolocation, it gets a little tricky. So hopefully newer things like MAUI can enable you to have a fully native app, but yet you are utilizing a lot of the web things. Okay. We try to help a little bit. I'm obviously biased because I work with our wonderful engineers. We make UI components for .NET and JavaScript. So anything .NET you can think of, WinForms, WPF, all things ASP.NET, all of Blazor, we have made UI components for years. Think about really heavy-hitting data grids, charts, visualization, navigation controls, layouts. We do it all. That's for .NET, and then we do similar things for JavaScript as well. So Angular, React, Vue, jQuery, we can help you make very modern web apps that you can light up with some amazing UI. So that's us. And let's look at some code. But any questions before we jump in? Any questions? You're all awake? Yeah, okay. All right. Let's look at how to mix and match the best we can. Okay, I am going to start off here with, the ID doesn't really matter here, but I'm going to start off with a quick little app here that is .NET MAUI with Blazor, and then we'll look at the JavaScript side of the story really quick. Now, take a look at this. This is too small for you to read. Let me know if I can bump up the fonts anymore. Okay, so when you start up a .NET MAUI app, file new project or command line like .NET new, this is essentially what you get. So it's one single project, but this one is trying to mix and match mobile desktop with some web stuff, right? So your app starts up just as any other .NET app will, and now it's become a little too big. But now we are bringing in this thing called the WebView, and if I look at my UI markup, this is a little bit of XAML because that's how we build desktop and mobile apps, but you don't have to use it if you don't like it. Essentially what you need is this one UI component, which is smart. It's called the Blazor WebView, and that lets you render all types of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. So that's all we are doing. But beyond that, you're going to see some web things in here, like root. That's a very web thing. I have some CSS or any static assets. You can throw it in here. And then here are my pages, which are essentially UI views for Blazor. They all belong to the web, but now we are just dropping them into a native project. So let's go ahead and run this first on a Mac. and then we'll look at it maybe on an Android device, and try to see where your comfort might be. So here, if you have done any Blazor, this looks familiar. This is just the Blazor Hello World thing, just running on desktop instead of web, and everything just works because the entire UI here is not native .NET. It is a WebView. So we are letting Blazor do it, the routing, the navigation, and anything else that you have. So for example, we do something called the theme builder. So this lets you open up your web UI and customize it starting from a design system. You want to customize it, and at the end of it, you get Sass or CSS. Bring it over. It's just you're rendering HTML, so you can bring in whatever CSS you want. So you can do all of that. So now once you have that up, I'm going to open up Safari here just to prove a point. Let's look at this here. You see this Safari develop mode? It is actually finding my Blazor app here because that's a big web view. This is essentially DevTools in Chrome or in Safari, wherever you want to use, but it's just not running in an actual browser. It's using a browser component, but you can still mess with HTML, CSS, JavaScript all day long. So it's the same developer tools. Now, again, just to see how this, essentially what this means, I am going to go in here. This is, again, now I'm taking you deep into native territory, but I can do iOS, I can do Android. There's my Android device manager, not sure why it's running. So I'm going to go do a quick reset because it's pretty quick. Factory reset, how quick is that? So let's do start it up. So now this is Android. You can have iOS simulators and Android simulators. Let's close this and let's see if it's coming up. It's a cold start, so it's going to take a minute. Come on, I got 9, or maybe 12 more minutes. Okay, so it's kind of up. So let's see if this will work, because sometimes it complains with deployments. Let's do this in debug mode. Deploying device, emulator found. It's thinking. You don't see it down here in the corner. It's trying to launch it. Hold on. Where's my app? There's my app. It failed, but it did kind of pull up. So same exact app that we just saw on desktop. Now it's on mobile. iOS is the same thing. So here's my app, and now it's a little bit adaptive because it realizes I have a smaller surface area. So now between like Mac and that went away. So now let's go back here to Chromium, and we can do things like Chrome. What is the thing? Devices, inspect devices. There you go. So now, since I'm on Android, it gives me the Chromium thing essentially. So I can pull up inspect here. Up comes the same app. I can navigate right in here, and then the emulator actually follows along. So again, this is too small for you to read, but you get the idea. Like this is the same HTML, CSS. So it's essentially a web app with JavaScript, with CSS, just running inside a native shell. So you can have some flexibility. Okay, make sense? All right, I'm going to switch gears here to show you a little bit more, because not all of you do Blazor. You do JavaScript. So let's do this. I'm going to drop into command line here. I am going to pull up my projects here. I'm going to do this one here first. Angular, that gives it away, right? Maybe you're doing some Angular for web apps. So I'm going to pull up VS Code here. So you get an app, which is essentially an Angular app. Notice there's now a Solution Explorer, so VS Code is kind of growing up to be almost like an IDE. So let's go ahead and run this. I think this is a .NET 7 app, so let's see if it remembers any past commands. Yeah, there it is. So I can do a .NET build, but I don't want Mac Catalyst. I want iOS. So let's do an iOS build now, because I don't care about the other ones. I just want it to be on iOS. And it's going to go talk to Xcode, come back. It's a native app, but it's just the UI is all web. So grabs the default simulator, this one here being an iPad Pro. It's another cold start. How many of you do Angular in the room? Anybody? Oh, okay. So this will look immediately familiar. This is Angular CLI, right? So an Angular app running inside of a mobile simulator or a device. Same experience on desktop as well. So everything is exactly the way you want. However, let me show you two more things here. So this is too big. So if I tap into this check number, you get a window that is kind of looking like a native window, but it's actually a web window. So it's an even-odd check. So I can just hit, say, 4, and it says, hey, it's even number, so I can do messaging, I can do windowing. Now, let's take a look at this here. You can't read this very well. It says get device info. Now, remember, this is an Angular app, so it's written with TypeScript. So I can tap on that, and now it's saying, hey, you are running this on an iPad Pro, whatever, 16-inch, and your orientation happens to be portrait. Those are very native things, right? That's very native to .NET MAUI. .NET MAUI knows all about the devices and the platforms, but we are calling into .NET from TypeScript because we can. It's the same runtime now. So let's see how we do that really quick. So if I look at my source code here, in my, let's actually do this. So in exactly the same way we did Blazor, now we have a www root, but I'm not using the Blazor index.html. I'm using this index.html, which is essentially my Angular app. So I did an ng build, and I got my polyfills, I got my runtimes, or whatever CSS that I want to bring over, and I'm just adding on the Blazor WebView, which it needs anyways, and I've dropped my Angular assets right in here, inside of my MAUI app. And that's it, it starts working. And then from my TypeScript code, I'm not going to show you the TypeScript part, but just like really quickly, the .NET side of it is super simple. Here's my .NET code, okay? So notice how that check number, these are the two methods we fired off. They're both decorated by an attribute called JS Invocable. This makes .NET methods available to JavaScript runtime, right? So there's the interop, and that interop is built in. You don't have to do anything. That's right there, Microsoft JS Interop, that's right there. And then my JavaScript is now calling into .NET. This is the get device info. That's how I know the device name. That's how I know the device orientation. These are MAUI APIs, and you can call them from JavaScript, so which is pretty nice. Now, it's unfair if I just talk about Angular and not the other one. So let's do that really quick. I'm not going to pull up the source code. If I can type, let's do a clear. And where am I? Let's do MAUI React. You know where I'm going with this, right? So let's find the .NET command, iOS again. Anybody do React in the room? Yeah. npx create React app just shoved inside a .NET MAUI shell, because it's the same exact tech that we're using. All we are borrowing is the WebView, a web browser that iOS has one, Android has one, Windows has one, Mac has one. So that modern WebView is really nice for me to be able to empower this. Any questions so far? No questions. You're all awake, right? Okay, all right. So let's do one more thing. I have maybe 8 minutes left. One question that we get a lot is what we are doing here with MAUI and Blazor together is this is essentially a native app, right? So I am dropping my Angular, my React, or my Blazor UI components right inside my .NET MAUI app, right? And this is fine to do. These are Razor components. This is fine to do, but what happens to your web app? Because this is meant for inviting web developers. You're not going to give up on the web, right? You still need to support your web browser app. So what's the trick? How can you still do web while you're doing native mobile and desktop? So there are ways to do that. Let's go back in here. I'm going to pull up a different solution. Let's see, which one is that? This one here, maybe. Oh, and there's one more thing I want to show you, because how native can you really get with Angular, Blazor, and so on? So here's a project. It's a solution. It's a Visual Studio solution that has multiple projects in it. I have some native Blazor things that are meant for web UI. So like these last 3 are web UI. And then I have a .NET native project. So it's the same exact Blazor, but I want the same view to power my web app and my native app. So if I switch to changing up my startup solution, and I go ahead and fire this up, start. Now this is a web app, right? So it builds it as a web app. For some reason, it didn't launch my browser. So I'm going to go do that manually. So let's do localhost 5000. That's where it was. This is Blazor. Hello world. It's working. right? Here's my counter component. That works too. Now you'll notice that this is running on my browser, but it recognizes that I'm running on my browser. Even though we will run a browser when we are on desktop or mobile, this is literally the browser. And it picks up window dimensions. That can come from JavaScript or it can come from .NET. So I'll show you that. So let's switch over now. Same app. I'm going to make the native one my startup project. And just to prove a point, what I'm doing here is I have brought out the shared Blazor UI and I've put it in a shared project. This is just a class library. And these are my pages. This is what's powering the UI on both sides. And there are also some other shared things like www, and here's my CSS. This is the standard Blazor CSS. And what I can do, that's the button. So I can come in here and I can change the button color to green. Gray, no, green was going to stand out more. So yep, if I can type, and we're going to comment out this line, that's it. So I can make a change in my UI web component in one place and see it on both sides. So let's run this app now on a Mac, because it's a MAUI app. It runs the same way on web versus desktop. So here's my MAUI app now. Now it says, hey, I'm running on Mac Catalyst, which is Apple's bridge of bringing iOS to the desktop. That's my window dimensions. If I look at my counter, now I have a green button, right? So change your code in one place. Keep all of your UI, CSS, and JavaScript in one place and drive both web UI and native UI. Okay, so that's the promise. And all of this is, open sourced on my GitHub repos if you wanted to see the code. I do want to show you one more thing here. We're at 5 p.m. One last thing, okay, I promise. Let's do this one here. One question that might come to mind is you're bringing web stuff to native, mobile, and desktop. How native is that app? Is it just the UI that we are doing, or can we actually do native things with that UI? So let's run this. This is a Blazor with MAUI project. iPad Pro is fine. We're going to run this thing really quickly. It's going to do a build and launch my simulator back up again. Sorry to go a little fast. This is a really short amount of time, 30 minutes. I'm trying to show you as many things. Apologies if it's confusing. Again, I'm just trying to show you the promise. Okay. You get Blazor UI now running on iPad or Android, but I have a button now that says show native things. So those are MAUI APIs that we are invoking. That tells me here's my app name. It's running on portrait on this resolution. This is the device name. It happens to be on Wi-Fi. Could be 3G, 4G, 5G, whatever is the network. So those are very native things. Now let's go into the counter component here. This one here I can write to storage. That's a date timestamp like 5:01 p.m. Go back in here, come back and read from storage. So like file system access, I can do that all day long because I have MAUI APIs. I can bring up my camera. Now, remember, this is a web UI Razor component, but I can tap into and bring up my camera or any media libraries from my device, and I can choose one, and I can render this on a web UI. And then the last thing is, this is for anybody who does Blazor, this fetch data essentially is the weather service, which is fake. But now I am on an iPad. I don't need to fake it. So this looks familiar, right? This is the iOS permissions thing. So it's asking, hey, this web UI component is trying to read your geolocation. Are you okay with this? Yes or no? Please do not say that you're going to stalk the user. But if I do allow it once, I get what's called the lat long of the device, like where exactly is the device, geolocation-wise, on Earth. So it makes sense? Some very, very native things that we are pulling off purely with Blazor, which is really nice. So if I look at, show you the code here, it is super simple here as well. I don't even need any of these, APIs. It's all built in. So right here from my Blazor UI, I can just tap in. I can look into app info, which gives us a lot of the app information, device display information. I can look into my connectivity stack to see how my app is connected. And then take a look at this one here, the counter component. When I clicked on that button to show you the image, that's an image HTML tag. And we are styling it with some CSS, all with just a few lines of code here. I can do a media picker, photo, give me a picture from your media library. I bring it back, get the full image file path and just show it to a URL. And we can also style it. Like there's a counter razor.css. So very web things. I'm just centering the image here. So very web things are welcome. And then the fetch here, I'm reading geolocation. Again, one line of code, because this is .NET. It just already knows how to invoke the get last known location. So all of the things that .NET MAUI can do on a native app, mobile or desktop, so can Blazor, so can Angular, so can React, right? So that's the portability that is really nice. I'm really out of time here, but let's see. Is there one more thing I wanted to show you? Oh, this one here. Yeah, one last thing, I promise. I'm like Steve Jobs, like one last thing, one last thing. Okay, this is just to kind of show you a different version of this. Let's fire this up. This is a MAUI app, but it's using a smarter WebView. This is using a hybrid WebView, just to show you what's possible. This UI is actually a React app, right? It's a to-do React application, so I can, I can just say, this is my plan for the evening. I'm just going to drink. And I can keep adding, I can delete. This is a to-do app, right? So React front end, but the code, the business logic, that's all .NET. So you can do stuff like this. If you look at the project here, this is my to-do data store. This is all C#. This is all .NET, but the front end is all React. That's because we are still bringing in that hybrid web view. It's a slightly different, smarter web view now, and we are just letting the React app render within my web view. Okay. I am now completely out of time, but let's go back here to where we stopped, and hopefully you see that there is a lot of help, a lot of promise for you to mix and match and do the right thing for you. Make your own stack, mix and match things, bring in JavaScript, bring in .NET, server-side or client-side, make native apps, and with full platform API access. So you are essentially maximizing how much code you're sharing between platforms. So hopefully you see that the world is your oyster. Go make the next amazing app, make a lot of money, be happy, and just let's have a code base that we're all happy to support. So thank you so much for spending the last half an hour of your day with me. You're all awesome. Thank you.